I RSVP'd yes to my brother's gala knowing the regulatory findings were about to be entered into public record. He had built the stage and invited 200 people to watch him succeed, and I sat in my seat and waited for Sandra Reeves to stand up. The gala was his idea. That is the detail I keep returning to. Not the exposure, not the silence that followed, not the specific expression on my mother's face when the truth landed in that room. The detail I keep returning to is that my brother Cole organized the entire evening himself. Rented the venue. Sent the invitations. Arranged the catering and the lighting in the program that listed his name at the top in letters large enough to read from the back of the room. He built the stage. He just did not know I was going to walk onto it. My name is Ren Alcott. I am 31 years old. For most of those years, I was the family's public disappointment, the one my parents referenced in conversations about what not to do with a life, the before picture in a story where Cole was always the after. I heard myself described as useless at a dinner table when I was 16. I heard the word again at 19. I stopped counting at some point because counting requires you to believe the number matters, and I had decided to put my energy somewhere it would return something. What it returned was the information I walked into that gala carrying. Information Cole did not know I had. Information that every person in that room was about to receive whether Cole wanted them to or not. Let me tell you about Cole first, because understanding him is understanding everything that came before the gala. Cole Alcott is 35 years old. 4 years older than me. He is the kind of person who understood very early that the right presentation of a thing is sometimes more durable than the thing itself, that if you construct the external version carefully enough, people will fill in the interior with whatever the exterior implies. He had been doing this since childhood, building the version of himself that the family needed and letting that version do the work of being believed. He was good at it. I want to say that clearly. Cole's ability to construct and maintain a version of himself was genuinely impressive. It required consistency and attention and a kind of social intelligence that I did not have and did not want. He maintained it with our parents, who received it gratefully because it gave them something to be proud of out loud. He maintained it with their friends and with the extended family and with the professional contacts he cultivated carefully over a decade. The version of Cole that existed in public was a successful financial consultant with a growing firm, a man who had built something real from his own intelligence and effort, a son who had justified every confidence his parents had placed in him. I had been suspicious of the version for 3 years. Not out of jealousy. I want to be specific about that because the easy interpretation of a sibling watching another sibling's success with skepticism is jealousy, and this was not jealousy. It was the specific suspicion that develops when you know someone well enough to see the seams in what they are showing you. When you have watched someone construct versions of things your whole life and you develop an eye for the construction. I had been watching Cole construct things since we were children. 3 years before the gala, I started paying attention in a different way. The useless comments started when I was 16. I had decided I wanted to study environmental science, which was not the kind of degree my parents associated with outcomes they could describe at dinner parties. My father, whose own career in commercial insurance had given him a very specific definition of legitimate professional aspiration, used the word useless the first time at the table one Sunday when I explained what I wanted to study. Not cruelly. Almost conversationally. As in, that sounds like a useless degree for someone who wants to actually make a living. My mother did not correct him. Cole, who was 20 at the time and already presenting the early version of the financial consultant identity, said nothing. He ate his food and looked at the table, and I understood even then that his silence was its own kind of position. The word came back. Different context, same message. A gathering at my aunt's house when I was 19 where my father explained to her husband that I was still figuring things out, unlike Cole who had always known what he wanted. A holiday dinner at 22 where a family friend asked what I was doing and my mother answered before I could, and her answer contained the word potential and the way people use potential when they mean its absence. I left that table early. I left a lot of tables early. What I did not do was stop. I finished the degree. I took a position with an environmental consulting firm that worked with municipal governments on infrastructure planning. I built a practice over 7 years that was quiet and unspectacular in the way that work is unspectacular when it does not have a publicist. I was good at it. The people I worked with knew I was good at it. My clients knew. The outcomes were documented in public records if anyone had thought to look. Nobody in my family thought to look. They were too busy watching Cole. 3 years before the gala, I was working on a municipal water infrastructure project in a mid-sized city 2 hours from where I had grown up. The project involved reviewing the financial structure of a private partnership that had been managing the city's water treatment operations for 6 years. The review was routine. The kind of audit that happens when a contract comes up for renewal and the city wants an independent assessment before committing to another term. 3 weeks into the review, I found something that was not routine. I found Cole's firm in the financial records. Not as a vendor or a consultant. As a silent partner in the private company managing the contract, a partnership that had not been disclosed to the city at any point in the 6-year relationship. A partnership that had been generating revenue from a contract the city had awarded competitively, without knowing that one of the evaluating consultants who had advised on the original award had a financial interest in the winning bid. I read the documents 4 times before I believed what I was reading. Then I read them a 5th time. Cole's firm. Cole's signature on the partnership agreement. Dated 14 months before the city had awarded the contract. A contract that his advice had shaped significantly. I sat with this for 2 weeks before I did anything. Not because I was uncertain about what I had found. Because I was certain about what it meant and I needed to understand the full shape of it before I moved. The shape of it was larger than I had initially understood. The partnership agreement was the visible piece. What it pointed toward was a pattern. 3 other municipal contracts in different cities over 7 years, each one following a similar structure. Cole's firm providing advisory services during the procurement process. A silent partnership interest in the winning vendor. No disclosure to any of the municipal clients. The financial benefit across all 4 contracts was substantial. The legal exposure was more substantial. I am not a lawyer and I did not pretend to be one. I took what I had found to the firm's legal team and then to the city's legal team and then to the relevant regulatory body, and I presented the documented evidence in the organized, factual way I present all documented evidence, and I stepped back and let the people whose job it was to determine consequences determine them. That process took 14 months. During those 14 months I did not tell my family what I had found. Not because I was protecting Cole. Because the process had to run without interference and because I knew my family well enough to know that telling them anything before the process was complete would create a version of the situation that I could not control. I controlled what I could control. I let the process run. Cole announced the gala 11 months into the 14. He sent invitations to what felt like everyone who had ever met him. His professional contacts. His clients. Our extended family. Our parents' friends. The specific overlap of personal and professional that people create when they want to demonstrate that their life is a seamless success in every direction. The gala was for a foundation he had established. A charitable organization focused on community infrastructure investment, which I want you to hold for a moment given the specific context of where his money had come from. My invitation arrived in a cream envelope with my name on it in a font that cost more than most people's monthly utility bills. I looked at it for a long time. Then I RSVP'd yes. I want to tell you about my parents in the weeks before the gala because this part matters. My mother called me when she received her invitation. She called with the specific energy she used when Cole had done something she wanted to make sure I had registered as impressive. She described the venue, which was a historic building in the city center with a rooftop terrace that cost more per evening than I made in 2 months at 23. She described the foundation and what Cole was doing for the community. She said, without the awareness that what she was saying contained everything I needed to know about the last 15 years, I hope someday you do something this visible, Ren. I said I hoped so too. She did not catch anything in my voice because she was not listening for anything in my voice. She had never been listening for anything in my voice. I said I would see her at the gala. I set the phone down and sat with a cream invitation in my hand, and I thought about my father using the word useless at a Sunday dinner table when I was 16 and my mother not correcting him and Cole eating his food and looking at the table. I thought about 14 months of documented evidence organized into a file that was currently sitting in 3 separate regulatory offices and 1 law firm. I thought about the gala. I got dressed and went to work. The night itself. The venue was everything my mother had described. High ceilings, warm light, the specific atmosphere of a room designed to make wealth feel like benevolence. 200 people in the kind of attire that announces they understood the assignment. A string quartet in the corner. Waitstaff moving through the room with the practiced invisibility of people who are very good at their jobs. Cole was at the center of it, the way he was always at the center of things he had arranged. He was wearing a suit that had been fitted and he was working the room with the ease of a man who had spent 35 years perfecting the version of himself that rooms like this received best. He saw me come in. Something moved in his face. Not surprise exactly. Something more specific. The expression of a person who has sent an invitation to someone they expected to decline and is now recalibrating because the person has not declined. He crossed the room toward me. Ren. His voice had the warmth he used in professional settings, the warmth that was real enough to function as real but that I had been reading correctly since childhood. Cole, I said. I didn't think you'd make it, he said. I RSVP'd, I said. You did, he said. He looked at me for a moment with the assessment he tried to hide behind the warmth, and did not quite succeed. Enjoy the evening. He moved back into the room. I found my parents. My mother hugged me and told me I looked nice in the way she said it when she was pleased I had made an effort. My father shook my hand and said it was good I had come. The ordinary surface of a family that had been performing its own version of itself for 31 years. I smiled. I found my seat. I waited. The program began at 8. Cole spoke first, which was appropriate since it was his evening. He was good at this. He had always been good at this. He talked about the foundation and its mission and the work it intended to do in communities that needed infrastructure investment. He spoke with the fluency of someone who believed what he was saying, or who had practiced believing it long enough that the distinction had collapsed. The room listened with the warm attention of people who have come to be impressed and are being impressed. My mother was in the third row, and I could see her profile from where I sat, and her expression was the expression she wore when Cole was doing something she considered worth witnessing. The program moved through its stages. Remarks from a city official who had partnered with the foundation. Remarks from a board member Cole had recruited from his professional network. The particular self-congratulatory architecture of a philanthropic evening doing its work. And then the program reached a section that had not been listed. The city official's deputy, a woman named Sandra Reeves, who I had met 14 months earlier in a conference room where I had presented my initial findings, stood up. She had not been on the original program. Cole looked at her from the podium with an expression I had never seen on my brother's face before. Sandra Reeves did not work for Cole. She worked for the city. And the city, over the preceding 14 months, had completed its investigation into the financial arrangements I had documented. The regulatory process had run its course. The legal determinations had been made. The outcomes had been settled in the 3 weeks before the gala. Cole did not know Sandra Reeves was coming. He did not know that the regulatory findings had been finalized. He did not know that the findings were going to be entered into the public record that evening, in this room, in front of 200 people he had assembled to witness his success. He did not know because I had not told him. And nobody else had told him because nobody else knew he did not know. Sandra stood at the microphone with the composure of a public official delivering a public record, and she explained, in the measured language of institutional accountability, what had been found. The partnership agreements. The undisclosed financial interests. The 4 municipal contracts across 7 years. The regulatory determination that the conduct constituted a serious breach of professional and fiduciary obligations. She did not name me. She did not need to name me. Cole was standing at the side of the room and I was sitting in my seat, and I did not look at him. I looked at my parents. My mother's face was the second time in my adult life that I had watched a person's expression reorganize completely and instantly, all the pieces of a face shifting at once into a new configuration that had not been there a moment before. My father had gone very still. The room had gone the specific silence of 200 people who came to witness one thing and were witnessing something entirely different. Cole left. Not dramatically. He simply was in the room, and then he was not in the room, moving through the side exit with the controlled pace of a man who has made a decision and is executing it before the moment passes. The room watched him go. I sat in my seat. Sandra concluded her remarks. The program did not continue in any organized way after that. 200 people began the careful process of processing what they had heard, finding the people they knew, talking in the low, urgent way people talk when something large has just happened in a shared space. My mother found me. She came through the room with the directness of a woman who has decided something and has set aside everything else to do it, and she stopped in front of me and she looked at me, and her face was doing things I did not have words for. "Did you know?" she said. Not an accusation. A question. A genuine one. "Yes," I said. "How long?" 14 months, I said. "I found the documents during a routine audit. I reported it to the appropriate parties and I let the process run." She looked at me for a long time. "You didn't tell us," she said. "No," I said. "Why?" I thought about the Sunday dinner when I was 16. The word useless delivered conversationally. The holiday tables and the phone calls and the cream invitation and "I hope someday you do something this visible." Because it wasn't the kind of thing I could tell you before it was finished, I said. And because I needed to do it correctly. Not as Cole's sister. As the professional who found what I found. She did not say anything for a moment. "That took courage," she said finally. The words came out carefully, like something she was testing the weight of before she committed to it. "It took documentation," I said. "And 14 months. Ren," she said my name and then stopped and started again. "I have said things to you over the years." "Yes," I said. "You have?" "I have said things and allowed things to be said that were not fair to you." "Yes," I said. "You have?" She did not look away. Whatever else my mother is, she is not someone who breaks eye contact when she is being honest. "I'm sorry," she said. I sat with it. "I know," I said. My father found me an hour later. The gala had dissolved by then into small groups of people making their way out, the organized evening having collapsed into something no one had come prepared for. The string quartet had stopped playing. The waitstaff were clearing things that no longer needed to be cleared for an event that had already ended. He came and stood beside me at a window that looked out over the city, and we stood there for a while without speaking, which was the most honest thing my father and I had done together in years. I looked up your firm, he said eventually. Not looking at me. Looking at the city. When? I said. An hour ago, he said. On my phone. While your mother was talking to someone. A pause. I should have looked years ago. Yes, I said. The projects are public record, he said. The municipal contracts. The infrastructure work. It's documented. It is, I said. You've been doing significant work, he said. For years. Yes, I said. He was quiet for a while. I use the word useless, he said. At the table. When you were 16. You used it more than once, I said. But yes. He looked at the city. His reflection in the window was the reflection of a man doing something uncomfortable and choosing not to stop. I was wrong, he said. About what I thought your choices meant. About what I thought you were capable of. A breath. I defaulted to Cole's version of things. His version of you. His version of success. I didn't look for my own. No, I said. You didn't. I'm asking you to let me try to do that differently, he said. I thought about what that meant. What trying differently looked like for my father at 63, after 16 years of Sunday dinner tables and holiday gatherings and phone calls where I was always the before picture in a story about Cole. I'm not going to pretend the 16 years didn't happen, I said. I'm not asking you to, he said. I'm not going to perform a reconciliation, I said. If something changes between us, it changes because it actually changes. Not because we both decide to act like it has. Cole relocated. I do not know where. My mother knows and my father knows, and they have not told me and I have not asked, because there is a version of family loyalty that does not require me to receive information I have not requested about someone whose choices created the situation he is currently in. My parents came to visit me 4 months after the gala. Not for a specific occasion. My mother called and asked if she could come and I said yes, and she asked if my father could come too and I said yes, and they drove 3 hours to my city and we had dinner at a restaurant I liked and we talked for 4 hours. Not about Cole. Not about the gala. Not about the 16 years of Sunday tables and the word useless and the holiday gatherings where I was always the disappointment they were contextualizing. We talked about my work. Actually talked about it, the kind of conversation where questions have follow-ups and the follow-ups have follow-ups, and by the end of it my parents understood more about what I did and why I did it and what it had produced than they had understood in the entire previous decade combined. My mother asked about a specific project I had worked on in a coastal city, a storm drainage redesign that had been covered briefly in a regional publication. She had found the article. She had read it before she came. She had looked. That was the thing that mattered most. Not the apology at the gala, which was real but was delivered in the shock of a specific moment. The looking, done quietly and in advance, before she saw me, when nobody was watching and there was nothing to perform. She had looked. It's important work, she said. About the drainage project. About the thing I had spent 7 years building toward. I didn't understand what it meant before. I think I understand it now. It takes time to understand things you haven't been looking at, I said. Yes, she said. It does. My father listened. He asked one question, about the regulatory framework that governed the kind of contracts I worked on, and it was a good question, the kind that tells you the person asking it has been thinking about the subject. I answered it. He listened to the answer. We stayed at that restaurant until they asked us to leave because they needed to close, which is the best way a dinner can end. I went back to the environmental consulting work the Monday after the gala like I had gone back every Monday for 7 years. The project that week was a soil contamination assessment for a city that needed to understand what it had inherited from an industrial site it was converting to public parkland. Unglamorous work. No gala. No string quartet. No cream invitations with embossed lettering. Just the documentation and the analysis and the report that would go into the public record and inform decisions that would affect a neighborhood for decades. I sat at my desk and I opened the files and I worked. At some point in the middle of the morning my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. It was a photo of the article about the coastal drainage project, which she had apparently printed and put on the refrigerator. I looked at the photo for a moment. Then I put my phone face down and kept working. What I would say to anyone who has spent years being called useless by people who were measuring the wrong things with the wrong instruments is this. The work does not require their validation to be real. You can do 7 years of significant work without a single family dinner where anyone asks about it. You can build something genuine in the absence of any audience that matters to you and it will still be built. The municipal contracts are in the public record. The storm drainage redesign exists and the neighborhood it protects exists, and those things are real regardless of whether anyone who shares your last name thought to look them up. Build the real thing. Not the version of the real thing that photographs well for the kind of event where the truth cannot survive contact with the documents. The actual thing. The one that is still standing when someone with the right training looks at the foundation. Construct nothing on false ground. That is the lesson of the gala. Not that the truth is dramatic or that exposure is satisfying or that being right for 14 months feels the way vindication is supposed to feel. It does not feel that way. It feels like documentation and process and the slow grinding work of letting the right people access the right information and trusting the system to do what it was designed to do. It feels like a Monday morning opening files. But the thing that was built on false ground is not standing. And the thing that was built on the actual foundation is. That is the only comparison that ever mattered. That is the only comparison that ever will.